Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, today let's talk about the Yonko. Specifically, we want to talk about Kaido, Blackbeard, and Shanks, and how their stories might in some way get interwoven. But yeah guys, before we actually get into the topic, I want to let you guys know that I was actually sent some art, which I want to show you guys at the very end of this video. Just a heads up, it's totally worth your time. So when it comes to Kaido, we have a general idea of when Kaido is going to appear in the story. It's going to be around the time that we have Wano. Obviously, Kaido is sort of the next major Yonko that these strats are going to take on. As for Blackbeard, right, Blackbeard's also pretty obvious because we expect some sort of major showdown probably near the end of the story, maybe before the strats reach Raftel. But when it comes to Shanks, there is a huge question mark. There's no obvious method for sort of Shanks to enter the story and have a huge role to play. Really, the only semi-consensus that I can find is that Shanks and Blackbeard will end up fighting because Blackbeard hinted as much or foreshadowed as much during the Marineford War. Quote, "It's not time for you yet." And we also don't expect Luffy to be the one to take out Shanks, meaning someone else is probably going to do it. And perhaps in some way or another, Luffy comes to join in this battle. Whenever it will be, wherever it will be. But I really think that there might be setup which might suggest how and when Blackbeard and Shanks might enter the story, and it might actually be in relation to Kaido. But I suppose in order to understand this theory, you must first accept that in One Piece, in various ways, is repeating itself. From events prior to the time skip to events after the time skip, there's very clear relationships between arcs. I made a much more in-depth theory about this in the past that is quite outdated now, but essentially, the lead up into Fishman Island as well as events in the East Blue, there is a ton of similarities, and even some indisputable direct parallels. When you look at Fishman Island itself, it is in many ways a mirror to Arlong Park. The relationship between Dressrosa and Alabasta is about the same. I think the most persuasive piece that I could throw in here shortly to convince you is that the powers of Doflamingo's subordinates are almost exactly the same as the powers of many of the members of Baroque works. Both Doflamingo and Crocodile are Shishibukai. Both had plans to take over a country. Crocodile's plan was thwarted and Doflamingo's plan ended up being successful. And both in various ways manipulated the perspective and the mindset of the people living in those countries, and specifically turned them against their king. And even going super deep into it, both of them had a princess character that was working in their organizations that ended up betraying them, such as Vivi and Viola. Hell, even the ending of Dressrosa was a straight parallel all the way back to Alabasta, where Fujitora, unlike Smoker, was able to act and give credit where it was due. But anyway guys, I'm not saying that they are exactly the same. There's a lot of new things introduced in each arc that makes them different and interesting. But I think that Oda takes general concepts and uses them in similar ways. But he also doesn't use them in the exact same way. There seems to be some very key differences in the way that he approaches them. Arlong Park explained why the humans might hate the fishmen, and Fishman Island explained why the fishmen hate the humans. Both Dressrosa and Alabasta showcased why the Shishibukai are bad for the world, but in the case of Alabasta, the strats intervened before anything awful could really occur. But in the case of Dressrosa, the strats were too late, and we get to see what would have happened had the strats not intervened in Alabasta. Hopefully you understand what I'm getting at here. And so as the story has progressed into Zou and Whole Cake Island, these parallels have been far less obvious, but I think still there. And Whole Cake Island seems like an amalgamation of several ideas, perhaps inspired from many different One Piece arcs simultaneously. Many people have already noticed that the idea of rescuing Sanji is in many ways similar to when in Enies Lobby the Straw Hats rescued Robin. Both of their pasts eventually caught up to them and forced them to leave the Straw Hat crew. Both of them felt the need to actually attack the Straw Hats in order to protect them from the groups that are trying to control them. And although you might think that Sanji was actually captured by a Yonko and Big Mom, the only reason that this marriage was going down was because of the Vinsmoke family, a member of the world government, just the same as CP9 was a member of the world government. And speaking of Cypher Pole, this is the second time in the story Cypher Poles has been relevant to the strats. The last time that they were was all the way back in Enies Lobby with CP9. But Whole Cake Island also shares similarities to the Thriller Bark arc. I think the general ambiance of the island itself, from the homies, the talking trees, is most similar to Thriller Bark. In fact, Big Mom's powers, if it can be compared to any other character's powers in the story, is most similar to Gecko Moria's. Both have, in various ways, the ability to give life to the non-living, although in Moria's case it wasn't technically life, but it's pretty much the same concept. And as you guys will probably know, I see a lot of additional parallels with the Amazon Lily arc as well. Big Mom being a female, just like Boa Hancock, the queen of her country, abilities which might not be able to affect Luffy, a sickness which is playing a role in their stories, and the potential that Luffy might actually make her into some kind of friend. And I think that there's a little bit of Impel Down as well, where the concept behind the Impel Down arc was to sneak in and grab your friend and leave, which is essentially the idea of what was taking place here in Whole Cake Island. Sneak in, rescue Sanji, and leave. But both arcs seem similar to me in the sense that the point was never to go in and actually defeat what was considered to be the main antagonist of the arc. But we're still getting that Lucci-esque fight against her first in command. But anyway, there's many more similarities that you can find if you look for them and took the time to explain them, but I don't really feel the need to do that. Regardless, I think what I'm trying to give you the impression of is that Oda is certainly, or it seems certainly, that he's using concepts of the past and reintroducing them in new and interesting ways. And so this leads into what I've already speculated about the Kaido arc. I'm not certain if the Kaido arc isn't going to be split into two parts. That a lot of people expect Kaido to go down in Wano, but I wonder if Wano is just the first step leading in to the defeat of Kaido. You actually see this in a bunch of arcs, but I think the most clear parallel here would be Water 7 and Enies Lobby. A lot of people just lump those arcs together because they're two parts to the same whole, but still separate major arcs within One Piece. So Wano could be the first part of the Kaido arc, and then it could lead to someplace else where Kaido is actually defeated. And so the reason that I speculated this is because Kaido stated himself that he wants to start a great war, a war that the world hasn't seen in centuries. And so, if you know that 2 years ago there was the battle in Marineford where a Yonko fought the world government, you would expect this battle to be on par with that one or potentially even greater. And you must also speculate that Kaido is actively seeking out this major war. So it would follow then that Kaido's plans really shouldn't have very much at all to do with Wano. Wano may exist to further Kaido's plans, but in order to create the scale of the battle that Kaido himself foreshadowed would require him to actively seek conflict with either Yonko or world government. That's the only way that it makes sense to me. And Aokiji even told Smoker to tell Marine headquarters to ready the admirals to act. So I think we can suppose that in the Kaido arc, we're gonna see Admiral and Marine presence. When was the last time that we saw the Marines ready themselves to prepare to fight versus a Yonko? Marineford. So potentially keeping in mind the parallels between post-time skip and pre-time skip, then you might suspect that the Kaido arc might be Marineford 2.0. And so again, guys, I'm not saying that it will repeat just as it did in Marineford. I think that's impossible. There's a lot more to Marineford than simply a Yonko going up against the world government. But Oda certainly likes to take various concepts from different arcs and use them again in new and interesting ways. And so now let's talk about Blackbeard. And Blackbeard was actually an integral part of the Marineford arc. Blackbeard is a schemer. He's a guy who comes up with plans in order to gain more status in the world, and this is what was showcased during the Impel Down and Marineford arcs, in which Blackbeard first used the opportunity that Luffy had provided in order to obtain new, strong crew members, and then take those crew members to Marineford, where he acquired the strongest devil fruit in the world. Blackbeard attempted to capture Luffy in order to become a Shishibukai. He then captured Ace in order to do the very same thing. Later we see him capturing Bonnie and giving it to the world government in order to acquire some ships. We also saw him potentially attempt to take on the Revolutionary Army and Baltigo, probably also for some sort of gain. The point is that Blackbeard takes known circumstances and then uses them to his advantage. And so this is where it's very important. Aokiji told Smoker to ready the admirals for something that Doflamingo, as a subordinate of Kaido, was intending to do. Later we learned that Kaido was intending to start a great war. Aokiji is currently a subordinate of Blackbeard, which means that Blackbeard knows what is going to happen. It is the perfect setup to have Blackbeard play some role in the Kaido arc. Blackbeard is a very ambitious man. Becoming a Yonko was not his goal. His goal was to find the One Piece and become the Pirate King. In order to become the Pirate King, that means he must actively seek the defeats of all the other Yonko. And this adds up with another theory. Now, Kaido's powers right now are pretty ambiguous. But as the leader of a crew which relies on artificial and real zone type capabilities and fruits, you might suspect that Kaido himself has a very powerful zone-type devil fruit, potentially the very strongest zone-type devil fruit in the series. And so why this may be interesting is that it's highly suspected that Blackbeard will end up with 3 devil fruit abilities. I'm not going to get into why in this video, but it's a very commonly accepted theory. Honestly, if it doesn't happen, I would be very surprised. And so currently, Blackbeard has, according to himself, the very strongest Logia-type devil fruit, the Yami Yami no Mi. He has, considered by the world, the strongest Paramecia-type devil fruit, in the Gura Gura no Mi. All he would require would be the strongest Zone-type fruit in order to complete the trifecta. And so there are only really 2 characters that right now most people speculate might have this Zone fruit that Blackbeard might end up acquiring. These 2 people are Kaido and Marco. 2 characters that we expect to see during the Kaido arc. So then to me, it seems to work out quite nicely for Blackbeard to make an appearance during the Kaido arc. Hopefully at this point that you agree, or at least see the possibility. Now what about Shanks? And so guys, this is what I like to think. What would Shanks do? If there was this great war that was taking place that could potentially endanger many innocent lives, what would Shanks do? And I really think that Oda has already told us. Shanks would show up in order to try and stop it. He did this exact same thing during the Marineford arc. Speaking of possible parallels, things that concepts Oda could take from before the time skip, incorporated them into the new world, this would be one of those things. I and others are looking for natural ways in which Oda can incorporate Shanks into the story that was previously set up, and this would be one of those ways. But as I have been saying, these things don't repeat exactly. There are very poignant changes made to sort of speak towards the progression of the story. And so back in Marineford, Shanks came to stop the war, and he was successful. And it wasn't yet time for Luffy to meet Shanks, because Luffy was not yet a great pirate. And Blackbeard also stopped fighting because he decided that it wasn't yet time to take on Shanks. I think it's possible that all 3 of these things change. I think it's possible that it may finally be time for Luffy to encounter Shanks, because Luffy is finally a great pirate. I also think that it's possible that Shanks arrives and he does not stop the war. He isn't able to stop the war, and I think that at this time, potentially after Blackbeard acquires a 3rd fruit, Blackbeard thinks that it is finally time to take on Shanks. I really wonder, guys, if the Kaido arc might end up being the Marineford arc had everything not gone so smoothly at the very end. The Marineford arc set up so much additional conflict that never came to be. Blackbeard was there but didn't really fight. Shanks showed up and the war happened to stop. Hell, they were even fortunate that Sengoku was the fleet admiral at that time. Akainu certainly wouldn't make the same decisions. It is almost begging for a readaptation of the fight. This could literally be setting up the most hype events we've ever seen in One Piece. Or as Kaido himself put it, the greatest war this world has ever seen in the past century. But anyway guys, before we move on to the art that I was sent, let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree. If you have anything else to add, just share your thoughts. But without further ado, let me show you what I received from Displate. So people over at Displate.com contacted me and sent me some awesome free art. And they gave me the option of sharing it with you guys, which of course I'm going to do because it's just that badass. Essentially, Displate is art printed on metal. It has a little magnet attached to the back that you can attach to the wall. It is extremely professional looking. In fact, the quality is about what you would expect from an actual framed portrait. I personally have never seen something printed so beautifully with so much texture and depth. Undoubtedly, any picture that I take of them is not going to do them justice because they look so fine. But if I really had to sum up Displate, guys, it's essentially the quality of a framed portrait, but at a much more reasonable price and tailored towards things that people of our generation would be more interested in. They don't just do anime, they just don't do One Piece, they do all sorts of other things. I really wouldn't be sharing this with you right now if I didn't think that you would like it, or if I myself wouldn't purchase it. Because straight up, guys, with Christmas nearing up, you might have friends or family that might be interested in artwork, then this is something that I think that you should really consider because it's so pro. I also have the very cool opportunity to share with you a special discount code for 20% off any of your purchases until the end of October. It's Joy Boy, which honestly makes me feel a little bit special. But yeah, if you're looking to go check them out, there is a link in my description which will take you right there. Go ahead and click on that, and you can browse and look at it and see if it's as cool as I'm hyping it up to be, which I think you will find that to be true. But of course, there's many other cool things about Displate that I could possibly mention, but I don't want this to go on forever. I don't want to make this seem like an advertisement. This is me just showing you something cool that I received, and honestly feel as though I'm doing somewhat of a service letting you know that this exists, especially if you are into artwork. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.